In the words of Angry Joe, Warner Brothers, you done fucked it up. And this has to be one of the most egregious displays of incompetence the gaming sphere has seen for God knows how long, possibly ranking up there in the all-time screw-ups list. I mean, how can you take a portfolio of IP like Warner Brothers has, which they could just literally show up for work, sit down, flick on the lights, and start printing wads of cash? We're talking games like Mortal Kombat, Harry Potter, the Batman games, Lego, and God knows, I'm probably leaving some heavyweights off the list here, but how could you take that resume and then turn around and consistently fumble and bumble around like a damn drunk in the dark to now land us at yesterday's devastating news is just simply beyond me. Like, you could show me this on a Venn diagram right now with all the information clearly spelled out, and I would still look at you and wonder, what the fuck just happened? Now, a lot of you don't know this side of me or my channel. I mean, I rarely get torqued like this, and I tend to keep my powder dry for moments like these. But man, I hate blatant incompetence and rank stupidity, especially when it is promoted to decision-making positions within a gaming company where these people make the big bucks while the hardworking developers and staff get kicked to the curb when the suits who made those stupid decisions have to lay them off. I hated it with Fantastic in the day before, and I chased them every step of the way here on the channel. I hated it, and I still hate it with Snail Games, Wildcard, and the Ark franchise. And here, I'm about to direct that anger at Warner Brothers. Now, admittedly, this might not be safe for work, but gross incompetence needs to be pointed out, and WB is currently at the top of my list. Coming to us from Insider Gaming and citing a Jason Schreier Bloomberg article, Warner Brothers has canceled the Wonder Woman game and shuts down multiple studios. Now, personally, I can't say that I was watching for a release date on this one. Speaking of Wonder Woman, I mean, I was curious about it, especially considering the studio that was making it. But the insane news here in the headline are the studios Warner Brothers just bodied, and more importantly, why, which we're going to get into in just a moment. Schreier goes on to report that the cuts reflect a refocusing of the games division on major franchises such as Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, Game of Thrones, and DC Comics, primarily Batman. Okay, so Game of Thrones was all the craze, I don't know, 10 years ago? I would guess to say not as much today, and that's not me throwing shade at any Game of Thrones fans out there. I'm one as well, but just that when a game is released alongside a movie or series that is currently ongoing and is really hot, the game also benefits from that buzz. Just take a look at CD Projekt and how well The Witcher 3 sales spiked when the series was killing it on Netflix. Cyberpunk saw similar spikes as well when the Netrunner series was airing, etc., etc. And maybe if we're looking around season 7, maybe season 8 for Game of Thrones, that's what, 2017 to 2019, then yeah, I would say it's a heavier hitter here, especially when it was hitting on all cylinders, but you get the picture. In an internal memo obtained by Schreier, it was said that, quote, too many recent releases have really missed the mark, along with a claim that they need to make more substantial changes to their portfolio and team structure if they are to commit the necessary resources to get back to a fewer but bigger franchises strategy. Which, by the way, is corpo talk for we, the suits, are going to shutter more studios and cancel more potential releases due to our own incompetence, which we will never admit to. And so, moving forward, we're going to play it extra safe and place overwhelming pressure on our remaining employees to launch mega successes or risk losing their jobs. This takes us to a report from last year when at the time Warner Brothers CEO David Zaslav admitted during an earnings call that the games business was substantially underperforming its potential, citing a more than, listen to this number, $300 million loss from financial disappointments like MultiVersus and Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which, newsflash here, Warner Brothers CEO David Zaslav, these were your fault. It was your decision to take Rocksteady, a studio known for immersive and intense and brooding single-player gaming experiences like Batman Arkham City and Arkham Asylum, some of the most highly applauded pieces of gaming history that received rave reviews, and you decided to take that team and ram multiplayer live service bullshit down their throats. Of course it was going to fail. You were chasing trends a decade old, and on top of that, you took a studio completely out of their element to make it. It's like Warner Brothers decided to take Wayne Gretzky, who was coming off a 200-point season in which he won every NHL award possible, and then they told him, hey, Wayne, from now on, we want you to play goalie. I mean, who does that? Who thinks, yeah, that makes perfect sense? Apparently, Warner Brothers does. I know you can't see me because I don't use a camera, so you're just going to have to trust me here, but as I'm laying down this narrative, I'm still just shaking my head. It's unfucking believable how people that have not a shred of intuition when it comes to games and what gamers are looking for, how is it that these people are not only placed in charge of making the games, but they're paid mental amounts of money to make all the wrong decisions? Seriously, Warner Brothers, if you want to just take $300 million and set a match to it due to your flagrant stupidity, why not first donate it to charity? Or you know what? Here's a thought. Give it to a smaller indie studio. Fund them and let them show you how to turn a passion project into a gaming sensation. There's more to this article, but the last important part says here, quote, we have had to make some very difficult decisions to structure our development studios and investments around building the best games possible with our key franchises. And then they go on to say Harry Potter, Mortal Kombat, DC, and Game of Thrones. After careful consideration, we are closing 3 of our development studios. Here's the body counts. Monolith Productions, Player First Games, and Warner Brothers Games San Diego. This is a strategic change in direction and not a reflection of these teams or the talent that consists within them. Of the 3 of these, Warner Brothers Games San Diego is probably the least known, as they served in a mostly support role, but the remaining 2 are the ones that are going to get the most attention. And we'll also highlight the sheer incompetence and the rot from within Warner Brothers. Starting off with Player First Games, and you may not know that name, but I'm sure you know of their game, MultiVersus, which launched back in 2022 into early access. And this thing was a hit. I mean, it really was. You know how sometimes, despite a studio's best attempts to produce a game that breaks through the boundaries and brings in some really interesting mechanics, something like a Guardians of the Galaxy by Eidos Montreal comes to mind. You know, a unique experience with some actually cool concepts. It's got a lot going for it in game, but it just never really gains any traction and never captures the attention of the player base. Well, MultiVersus was actually the complete opposite of everything I just talked about there. It certainly came in like gangbusters, and it was angled to compete with the likes of Smash Bros. And it, by the way, immediately captured the attention of gamers. It had this wild mix of characters, and of course, it had a fairly stacked roster like, say, Batman and even LeBron James. And here's the kicker. With all of that going for it, they pulled it from early access, and then they just completely took it off the market. I'm still wondering who in the hell made that decision, because from that point on, that game was entirely doomed. You see, gaming release windows are small, man. You have those precious few weeks or months to launch and quickly build up a dedicated and large following that is going to support your game, and Multiverse nailed it. They had it all. In the gaming industry, you hear this phrase thrown around quite a bit, lightning in a bottle. For instance, Ubisoft's The Division from 2016, lightning in a bottle. Larian with Baldur's Gate 3, hell, even CDPR with Cyberpunk 2077, although that one took a long time for the lightning to actually mature. But the point is, these moments come so rarely in gaming, and Player First Games had one of those moments with MultiVersus. It was poppin'. It had decent reviews. The players were there. And along comes WB Corporate. They pull it from early access and take it off the market. Then, listen to this, they sit on it for a year, claiming to smooth out the rough spots and try to relaunch it a year later. This time is the full release. And of course, you guessed it, the game flatlines. Man, I told you earlier, gross stupidity is one of my hot buttons. And for Warner Brothers to take a game that was hot, then to pull it completely down, sit on it for a year, and to come back a year later with the same product and expect anything less than total failure. I told you that the suits were horrible, but it gets even worse because Warner Brothers actually purchased this studio just 8 months ago. They went from buying the studio that had this successful game to then shuttering them in 8 months. Unreal. And finally, on the chopping block, enter Monolith Productions, who were working on the Wonder Woman game. And by the way, it said this thing went through at least one reboot during development before the news of this closure. And to be honest with you, I really don't know why they should be working on this, considering what they brought to market in the past with their incredible Middle-earth series. Things like Shadows of Mordor in 2014 and Shadows of War in 2017 were some incredible pieces of gaming cinema, probably best known for that crazy and incredibly immersive Nemesis system. Now, admittedly, I didn't spend enough time with either of these games. I think if I were to lay down an estimate, maybe a total of about 100 hours spread between the two, but that Nemesis system, I remember, was insanely cool, and it was reportedly going to be retooled and reused for the Wonder Woman game, but again, it's not to be. And it might not be seen again for a very long time, as we just got breaking news again from Insider Gaming that Warner Brothers Games not only has the Nemesis system patented, which we knew, but they've got the tech on lockdown until 2036. And this is exactly the reason why you shouldn't have patents for moments like this. A piece of programming that is insanely cool and could have been shared around, and through incompetence and mismanagement, WB gets to control it under lock and key. And oh, by the way, the studio that came up with the tech just got their marching orders. Okay, a couple pieces worthy of mention here as we kind of wrap this thing up. The first of which is these closure notices are becoming way too often, and I wanted to send my best wishes out to all those affected. May you land with both feet on the ground and find employment as quickly as possible. Also, what we're seeing is, more often than not, when you finally get a chance to turn over the stones and examine these closures and failures, is that some C-level board or individual who's looking at trends from 10 years ago and saying to themselves, hey, that looks like a moneymaker, let's try to copy them. Those are the people or the person that is making these dumbass decisions. They're taking studios and talented developers completely out of their wheelhouse. They're chasing trends and they're cramming them into dev cycles they have no business attempting. Also, a bit of a side note here for context, as recently as January of this year, we saw that David Haddad, head of the video game division at Warner Brothers, was stepping down. And there's also been some very recent finger pointing towards him and the gross mismanagement. But yeah, reading this news, another gut-wrenching round of closures. And what makes this news sting even harder, at least for me, is that there's some really good studios who pushed out successful and well-received IP kind of lumped in there. I mean, take a look at Monolith. They took home several Game of the Year awards with Shadow of Mordor, and admittedly, they're probably not the same studio now that they were back then, but here we are a decade later, working on a new game, and Warner Brothers decides to just shutter them. Throw in there Player First with all the gross upper-level mismanagement and indecision, with their smash success MultiVersus and all of the wild happenings from the launch to then pulling the game and shelving it for a year. Then they bought the studio, and here they are closing that same studio 8 months later. Really, at this point, Warner Brothers, you should just license out your IP. Put it in the hands of some loving and knowledgeable studios that know what the hell to do with it. Give them a big, fat check to make the games, and then sit back and rake in the bank. Because with that sick portfolio of IP, as I said, the brand name cash is there. It just needs someone with half a brain to get in there and actually point the way. If you happen to like the video, please consider hitting subscribe. All my socials can be found in the video description. And until the next one, this is LtBuzzLitebeer, signing off.